Oh, good afternoon, everyone. I've just finished having a fight with my son. Oh my God, this man, 36 years old and got no kind of sense whatsoever. My firstborn, and I love him dearly. Anyway, the rant over. It's wonderful to be here today. The third video. I need to start by extending apologies that I have missed. I think it's 3 videos. Our intention was to upload one a week. Sadly, after the second one, there were a number of family crises that compromised my ability to record and upload as I planned. And, people say to me all the time, life will send you lemons and you use them to make lemonade. But actually, if you have no water, even with the intention being correct, there is no lemonade making. And the crises, whilst I'm not going to go into detail about some of them, I can say one of them was the approaching the first anniversary of my mum's death on Christmas Eve. And I thought I was strong. I thought I had started to reconcile with the void that she'd left in my life, in my heart, in my soul. But as the weeks approached, my coping skills, how do I put it? I felt that I was free falling and I just had nothing left to keep me whole, to keep me intact. And I say that, but on Christmas Eve, I was blue lighted to hospital via ambulance. And it's the strangest thing, when you're lying in an ambulance and you're hearing people talk about, they said my age, they said I had an underlying heart condition, and you hear the blue light, you hear the siren, and it's what you're seeing on the TV. And all of a sudden, the forewarning in the hospital that I'm on my way was about me. And in all things, I called this video Vulnerability and Resilience, Joy in the Morning. Because in all things, I have to give God thanks. Because there definitely is joy in the morning. There definitely is joy in the morning. And whilst I wasn't afraid of being hospitalized, what it taught me was about the very fine line between health and ill health. And I think there's something also about vulnerability and allowing one to be vulnerable. It's not something that I can easily acknowledge in self. It's not something that I would readily accept as belonging to me, vulnerability. But it's something that I've grown to acknowledge in self. It's something that I have grown to understand that in order to heal, one must be vulnerable and acknowledge that vulnerability. And I vowed when I was discharged that in order to allow my mum to rest, I had to let her go. How? I don't know. I don't know that I'm anywhere near that yet, but I try to make myself believe that God has shown me my mum in paradise. I see her in paradise. I still struggle with the fact that she's not here and the trauma of her passing is overwhelming. It's suffocating. And at times you feel like you're drowning. But I must say that I continue to take one step at a time. I continue to stand tall. I continue to breathe, because that's what my mother would have wanted. She would not have wanted me to be in this dark place of despair. And there's something, and somebody said to me, Bern, how did it feel? And I remember saying, I was very, very comfortable in this place of pain. For months, I wore pain as a comfort blanket. And, I come from a family, we don't really get a lot of sleep anyway. But insomnia became a friend of mine. And I found myself just clock watching, praying for daylight, because 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm up, 3 o'clock in the morning, looking at my clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. And then you see daybreak and you just think, thank you, God, another day. Not just another day where I have to think about sleep, another day when I can get up and give God thanks for another day. Slowly, I'm coming to terms with I need to sleep, because halfway through the day, my body's crashing, because first of all, I'm old. Secondly, I've had no sleep. But I still give God thanks, because since my mother has died, I haven't worked. I'm here but for the grace of God. God has sustained me. And when I started thinking about, let me take you back a little bit and just talk to you about my princess for a bit. So when she saw the second video, I said to Princess, so how did I do, Princess? She said, much better, Grandma. That was much better. I said, don't you think I spoke a bit too loudly? I said, I forgot I had the microphone up. It sounded like I was shouting. No, that's all right, Grandma. You'll get used to it. Just thought that child. And then her mum said to me, Mum, she has told everybody that has come in her vision, all her friends at school, all their parents, my grandma is famous. She's got her own YouTube channel. She was so proud. And it's interesting because I went to see her on Tuesday, and she said to me, Grandma, you haven't made any more videos. What's happening to your YouTube channel? And do you know what? If just for her, I have to show her something around sustainability and keeping to one's word and just seeing things through, because she has to know that giving up is not an option. So whilst I wasn't giving up to her, because obviously I'm not going to tell her the details of why I wasn't able to upload in those 3 weeks, all she knows is that I've not uploaded. And so for her, there's a disconnect between what I'd said in that I would upload one a week and my actions, which didn't follow through. So I have to show her and her siblings that your word is your bond, and there are going to be curves in the road along your journey, but you have to somehow find a way to navigate them and maneuver around what those obstacles are, what the challenges are, what the barriers are. So although the crises that I was dealing with were not self-imposed and they weren't all necessarily about me, I had to show up for others. I had to be there for others. I am not in any way going to apologize for that, because in all things, I do what I think is right at that time. And I am proud of the woman that I am, because I owe that to my mother. I am proud of my integrity. I am proud of my moral compass. And I'm proud that people feel able to call me in their time of need, seeking support, knowing that support is going to be readily available, without judgment, without criticism. And I will continue to make myself available to my loved ones so that they can tap into any resources that I have that they believe will assist in any situation that they find themselves with. obviously the situation with the anniversary of my mum's death was traumatic. My poor husband came with me obviously to hospital, and when he realized they were going to admit me, he lay down on a bed, and the doctor actually covered him with a blanket. Can you believe that? And Casey woke up in the middle of the night. Oh, bam, bam, the doctor, when's the doctor coming? When's the doctor coming? Because they were waiting for the cardiologist. And I had to inform him that the doctor has been, but you were fast asleep. I didn't have the heart to wake him because I could relate to him what the doctor has shared with me. But I also knew there was another doctor's round coming up in the core working hours that he'd be party to. But also because it was Christmas Eve, early Christmas morning, we had seasoned all this meat, and I'm just thinking, brethren, we can't both be here because all this meat's going to go to waste. And I had to persuade him to go home and cook a Christmas dinner with the assistance of the beautiful Rebecca and beautiful Bianca, who, I can't even talk about those two women, mothers of my grandchildren, phenomenal women who I now include as part of my dream team, women who are fantastic mothers, who are fantastic daughters-in-law, who are fantastic human beings, and just hold me when I feel that I just can't do it again. And my dream team is very small because they are all phenomenal. And within that team, I have all that I require. They're godly women. They're women whose advice I seek and I take action on. They're women who tell me the truth. Sometimes I don't want to hear the truth, but because they love me, they know I need to hear the truth because that truth galvanizes me. Galvanates. What did I just say there? Galvanizes me into action. Galvanate. Just made up a word. Galvanizes me into action. And so I'm thankful for my dream team. And when I talk to them about this third experience of going into hospital, it doesn't faze me anymore. I didn't for 1 minute believe I was going to die because I know my mum and God is not ready for me just yet. But what it did make me do is really reflect on trauma, resilience, vulnerability. How do we rise? How do we rise from the pain, the stress of trauma? How do we rise so that we take back control? How do we rise so that others see us walking tall? Most people around me would never know what I was going through, what I had been through, what I was going through Christmas Eve. And often say, oh, you're so strong, you're so strong. But they don't know the inner turmoil because you don't share every aspect of your being with individuals. You share what you feel comfortable sharing with those individuals at that time based on the quality of that relationship. And so the trauma that I was walking in, I had to give myself time to reflect on why this interest in trauma, why this interest in women specifically. And it took me back to a time many, many, many years ago. And I remember I was working in an assessment center. And that assessment center were predominantly for parents whose children had been removed by local authorities, and or the local authorities had a plan to remove children, but were giving parents a last attempt to evidence good enough parenting. And so they'd come to the assessment centre. It was residential for some of them. And they would carry out their duties as a parent, but with extensive scrutiny. And I think in many ways, intrusion. They were expected to perform normally, but with cameras recording every aspect of their parenting. And I remember there was one young woman, and I'm going back at least 20 years, for whom there was some significant concerns about her children, some of which had been removed from her care, some were being corporately parented, others had been adopted. And she had a new baby that had been removed from her care, but she was fighting to see if he could be returned into her care. And I remember her history being absolutely awful. She was believed to be the product of rape, didn't know her biological father's details. Her mother didn't know her biological father's details. Subsequently discovered that her mother was a sex worker. And this young woman was raised in a household where she was exposed to very adult activities and adult material that was quite significant and very, very abusive, to the point where we now know that some of her mother's male visitors started approaching her. And the sadness in that is that because her mother was engaged in what she was engaging in, she didn't protect her daughter. And if I'm being honest, I don't think she would have known how to protect her daughter because of the mother's own trauma. And this young woman has these children who are the product of really abusive adult-child relationships. And she was fighting to keep this last child that she'd recently had. And I remember the staff coming to me and saying, "Oh, she won't speak to us, she won't engage, she won't tell us anything." And it was almost like they were giving up because it was already in the court arena. The report would have read, so-and-so, so-and-so, session 1, non-engagement, session 2, didn't engage. And so it would have gone on until it would have been presented to court as this young woman wasn't engaging, wasn't allowing us to make a difference for herself and or her child. And the decision ultimately would have been to keep the child in local authority care. And I don't know what it was then, and I don't know what prompted me to get involved because it wasn't my role. There were workers specifically employed to work with these young women. No, they weren't all young actually, these women, these parents. And at that time I was in a more managerial role. And I remember thinking, we have got to find a way of getting her to speak with us. And I decided to work with her. One session I decided I was going to do one session with her and see if we can get her to start to open up. And I think I started it with looking at an eco map and allowing her to dictate where people went on that eco map of her life. And because it was so visual, she started to put people in strategic places around herself. And don't let me make you think that this was easy, because it really wasn't, because she didn't understand the concept of an eco map. and she had never given herself permission to think about her being central to anything. And that's key, actually, because if she doesn't feel valued, if she doesn't feel seen, if she doesn't feel acknowledged, if she doesn't feel that she's important, why would she engage in a system, in a process where she believed all we were trying to do was get enough evidence to keep her child away from her permanently? And in that eco map, she identified many, many people who we would deem abusive, where safeguarding was a significant challenge. But because of her cognitive maturity, she had no concept of that. But for me, the breakthrough was that she was opening up. And at that time, when I was doing that work with her, the expression trauma informed wasn't part of my vocabulary. So I didn't understand that I was working in a trauma informed way. I knew that I needed her to guide me in understanding her journey, her truth, and her feelings about her children who had been removed from her care, some of whom had been adopted and she had no contact with. So there were no open adoptions, there's no telephone contact, nothing like that for these children. And the pain of loss, that I saw in that woman's eyes was my driver for change. And whilst I couldn't support a recommendation for her child to be returned into her care, what I think we did achieve was her feeling for the first time that she had an input. She had an input in the chronology we wrote about her life. She had an input in being engaged in the econ map, the final econ map, because there were lots of things that changed over the weeks, and how she positioned different people when her understanding started to change about the role of adults in her life. It didn't change the fact that she was, in her head, in an intimate relationship with a very, very, very abusive older man who we believed had been one of the people that kept her in bondage sexually. And we believed he was the father of this little boy. So in terms of her understanding, I think we just started to scratch the surface. This young woman would need years of psychotherapy to really understand what had happened to her, and sadly her role in her children not being in her care. And I think even then there for me was a passion about truth, and no matter how painful that truth was, helping her to understand the world around her, but with her being central to that world. And I think that was the beginning of my really wanting to understand parenting in a different way. So whilst her parenting, in my opinion, because of the trauma she was walking in, was not ever going to be good enough for her to keep the children that she was fighting for, the child that she was fighting for, I know that in time, she will appreciate the time that was spent to help her to start to look at her role and what has informed that role. So the quality of parenting that she was afforded, the quality of parenting that she afforded her own children, who demonstrated behaviors that she emulated, what affected her functioning, and how was her functioning even established so that she understood her role, the pain of that. Even, in one of the sessions, she broke down when she was thinking, when we were talking a little bit more about her mother, and she was estranged from her mother. Because I think in some of the work that she'd done with some of the therapists, she had started to acknowledge that her mother was not a safety factor. She could never have been deemed somebody who prioritized her daughter's needs. And when I think of my own mother and look at the correlation between my experience of my mum and this young lady's experience of her mum, they're miles apart. Because I know for my mum, everything she did was done out of love. Every single thing she did was done out of love. And I think I've alluded to some of the gaps in terms of her working ethic, her work patterns, not affording her a lot of time to meet the emotional needs of all her children. I'm one of 10 children. But she provided for us in every other way that she knew how. And for that, I will always be thankful. I will always cherish the sacrifices that she made for her children. And so I've had time in the last few weeks to really reflect on, how do I rise? What do I need to help me to rise? Acknowledging the trauma, but not allowing the trauma to define who I am. Not allowing the trauma to be my future. And big words, right? Because I know the trauma of my mum's passing totally disabled me, totally mobilized me in ways that when I think about it now, it's quite shocking. There were days when I was wrapped in my blanket of pain and just saw people doing regular, everyday things like going shopping. I couldn't understand how the world continued to revolve and my mum wasn't here with me. And people were laughing and joking outside. I'm thinking, how is it possible there to continue to be joy in people's lives? And there's this void in my heart. And my heart is constricting from the loss of my mum. How can joy exist? When I talk about, the name of this video of vulnerability and resilience, however way around I've called it, and joy in the morning. I never believed there'd be joy in the morning. My relationship with God was gone. Thank God. Thank God. He sustained me. Thank God. He died for my sins. Thank God I can kneel at his feet, and thank God I can stand on his words. Joy cometh in the morning. Praise your name, sweet Jesus. And so in my quiet time, in the stillness of time, I thought about, how do I connect with an audience to explain trauma using my personal and professional experiences? What do I need to do to first safeguard me, my mental health, protect my children from additional pain, because the loss of me is pain to my boys, show my grandchildren that failure is not an option and that there is nothing wrong with falling as long as we understand the learning as we stand back up. Because in all things, in all adversity, we have got to see the potential for growth and development. And it's a beautiful thing to acknowledge once you get over that season, once you get over that period of time, that you can fall, you can have setbacks, but you have the resilience to step up, step around, go under, overcome, move forward, knowing that you are being guided, you're being supported, angels are encamped around you, your light has been, your path has been lit. And however people choose to see that, I choose to see it as me being an obedient child of God. And I know that in every adversity, I can turn to God. I sat down and thought about what did I need to do for myself to help me navigate trauma, pain, loss, change, stress. Because I first had to do for self before I can start to think about how do I support others in that? What do I, Mary Bernadette Eugene-Charlery, what do I offer, and how does one ensure empathy? So how have I looked at my journey? How have I navigated my journey? What are the strategies I've adopted? How have those helped? How have those impinged? How have those assisted? And so I came up with a framework. Those of you who know me knows I love a framework. And it's 7 steps to healthily managing trauma, stress, and loss. And I call it the Rise and See. And I'm going to very briefly give you the 7 steps. I'm going to offer you a strap line for each one. And I hope, God willing, next week, I can go into a little bit more detail in every single step so that it starts to take us through a strategy around hope, a strategy around joy, a strategy around overcoming and managing adversity healthily. And I'm going to invite you to comment on the framework. I'm going to invite you to make suggestions about next steps in terms of video content. I'm going to invite you to comment on this video because I like the engagement. You see, I like the one-to-one, face-to-face work with people. And I almost wanted to do a PowerPoint presentation and present it as a learning tool. But I know that in all things, we need to start small. So I'm going to read what I've written. It's not long. It's not anything that I think if you give yourself permission to really think about, that you wouldn't have thought about for yourself. But it's certainly something I thought of for me. And in looking at Rise and See, I've had to separate rise as in rising from the experience of trauma, loss, change, stress, and seeing the outcome. So forgive me as I read from this because an old woman, I don't remember it all. So in terms of rise, my son is so annoyed.
Sorry.
What are you doing here?
Sorry. I'm going to say turn it off when you finish. I can cut this bit out. But turn it off when you finish. Press that and then...
Where are you going?
I'm going to get swimming with the kids. And then...
You're going swimming?
Yeah, with the kids, yeah.
Well,
then...
wait for me to finish.
No, because he needs to go now. He's going to get there.
Okay, bye.
Turn it off when you finish. Press the ending when you finish.
Okay, bye.
And then I'll come back and pick you up.
Okay, for those of you who don't know.
Sorry. Leave it in.
You're going to say you're going to cut it out, but you're not going to cut it out. No, you're going to leave it because you want me to look stupid.
It's authentic. It's authentic.
Authentic.
Yeah.
Whatever. Bye. Okay, so let me. Excuse me. Bye. Can you believe that? I told you, 36. I have no kind of sense. Anyway, the Rise and See, the 7 steps framework to healthily managing trauma, stress, loss, change, etc. He's come back in. He's come back in. I'm going to pretend he's not here. So the 7 steps. The first 4 is how we rise. The last 3 is what we see and how we sustain it. So the first step is to, I'm going to put on my glasses because again, an old lady can't see. Oh my goodness, look at these indentations in my head. Anyway, whatever. The first step is to reflect and in that reflection, it's really about acknowledging and validating your feelings. So it's acknowledging your trauma, acknowledging your stress, but validating your feelings because your feelings are important and your feelings are real. And like I said, with your permission next week, I will go into a lot more detail about each one of those 7 steps. So the first step is to reflect. The second step is to identify and to find healthy outlets. And for me, the healthy outlet is exactly this, making these videos so that I'm able to recalibrate, to review, to monitor self via these videos, because that's an outlet for me. I'm surprised at how much I share in these videos because that's never ever been the intention. But I think there's something around intentionality and, like my son said, authenticity that I have to walk in to be true to self. And I've always said, even though I've not been diagnosed, I believe I am on the spectrum because if it doesn't make sense to me, I can't rationalize it in my head. And so for me, there's something around I have to understand what's going on for me. And that's why I have these outlets. The third thing is to stabilize. So I was looking at practicing mindfulness and grounding techniques. And by that, what I mean is, what is it that keeps me believing that I'm healthy? What do I mean by grounding techniques? And again, like I said, I can go into a lot more detail. And there is another theory that I've come up with, the 5 steps around how we get grounded, bringing us back to the present so that we don't allow the pain to overwhelm us and to overcome our present and negatively impact our future. So what is it that we do to ground self so that we can stabilize self? The 4th thing in terms of rising is to engage, and that's seeking support. Identifying, I've spoken a lot about my dream team, identifying who your dream team is, and that will come with trial and error because there are going to be many people in your lives who you believe you can trust with your innermost feelings and your perspectives, your observations. In time, you'll see a stripping of those people because what you thought you could get from them in reality isn't what you do actually get from them. So you do have to be really confident about what your dream team brings to the table, what your dream team brings to you, your situation, your life, the whole of you. So that's what I talk about when you engage seeking support. There'll be professionals who'll be able to support you. There'll be friends who'll be able to support you. There'll be services. And when we talk about services, I know that Freedom to Fly has been birthed because of my personal experiences, has been expanded on because of my professional experiences. And in time, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So they're the rising categories. So it's reflect, identify, stabilize, and engage. And the seeing part of it is sustain. So prioritizing rest and self-care. They're the things you do after you acknowledge and you're rising from your trauma. Making sure you give yourself permission to care for self. So let me tell you what I do for myself. I now have a personal trainer. So I see that personal trainer twice a week, on a Monday and a Friday. But in addition to that, I go swimming in the mornings. I have aqua aerobics classes that I go to on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I do meditation on a Saturday morning. So it sounds like a lot, but actually it's literally an hour of your day. And because I've not worked and because I still have time to do that, I know I'm in a privileged position that I do have time to engage in those activities. But don't think that's always been my portion. It really has not, as you can see by my size. I'm taking the power back. I'm saying mindfulness, self-care are things that I'm deserving of. So I've made a decision to join the gym and I'm doing what I need to do. The next thing I would say in terms of seeing is embrace. So reflecting on purpose and gratitude. So I know my trauma, I call it my trauma, and I don't want to claim it as mine. The trauma that I've walked in has made me purposeful in terms of my company, Freedom to Fly. And it's no coincidence that my company is called Freedom to Fly, because it really is about how do I free self? Because I've always felt, and I've said it before, that in all the strategic positions that I've had, in all the positions that I've had, actually, I felt that my wings were clipped and I wanted the freedom to fly. My company's called Freedom to Fly because I feel that I have it within me to assist others to free themselves to fly. And then evolve. Evolve is so important. Taking it one step at a time, literally giving yourself permission not to feel that you have to run, but taking one step at a time. I'm just going to recap. So it's a Rise and See framework. The 7 steps. Mary Bernadette's 7 steps to healthily managing trauma, stress, adversity, loss, change. Reflect, identify, stabilize, engage, sustain, embrace, evolve. And as I aforementioned, I am going to ask for your input in whether or not you want me to expand on each one of those further next week, whether any specific topics you want me to focus on, any questions that you have. And in one of the videos, I will talk about the programs that I offer via Freedom to Fly. They're all trauma informed. They're all neurodiverse sensitive. And let me see if I can remember them all. So we've got a program called Steps, which is for parents. Allow It, Squash the Beef for young men. Esme, The Essence of Me for young women. I have I Say No for primary school age children. I've got Guided Growth for one-to-one work with young people who are involved in, might be affected by extrafamilial harm. I've got Anchor, which is a program for corporate parents of foster carers. I've got Cuddles, which is a parenting program for parents of children under 2. And there's a wide range of other services that I offer to organizations, mentoring, coaching, staff development, service improvement, that kind of stuff. But I know that all of these have been informed by my own experiences. And it is no coincidence that my focus is on trauma and my focus is on recovery, because I know I'm a living example of recovering from trauma, of rising and seeing, of ensuring that I identify the resources around me that keep me whole, reflecting on the quality of parenting that was afforded me and how privileged and blessed I feel to have been parented by the mother who did parent me. I am able to compare that to the experiences of others and know that I can celebrate how much my mother poured into her children and how valuable that pouring into has been in sustaining me past her physical presence. I know that I've worked with so many women, particularly who were broken and where all they needed was a listening ear. All they needed was somebody who had something in common with them. All they needed was somebody who said, I see you, I hear you. All they needed was somebody who engaged with them, not at them. All they needed was somebody who was honest, irrespective of what that honesty looked like, as long as you were safeguarding people's mental health. You were not trying to destroy people by some of the information you shared, and being sensitive and respectful of individuals' uniqueness. And that takes me to, a woman that I worked with a few years ago. And I'm not going to go into too much detail because she would be very easily recognizable. But what I will say is, all over the local authority files, all you saw was minimizing risk, non-engagement, don't understand safeguarding, all of that stuff, all the negatives around why people don't engage. But nobody had done any work with this young woman. And at the point that I was a head of service at the time, actually, I made the decision. No, I wasn't. I was a service manager. I made the decision to speak to her myself, because having reviewed the file, it just broke my heart, because if any of her children requested access to their files later on in life, all they will see was the negative descriptions of their mother on their case file. And that can't be right. We have somehow to be able to balance that, because in all things, we must approach it from a strength-based approach. What are the strengths within this family? What are the strengths that this woman walked in? None of that was captured. And without going into detail, what I will say is she left me with a sentence so profound, it captured everything about her story. Every single thing about her story. And what she said to me was, Miss, I wear the robe of shame. And even thinking back on that exchange with her, it was so emotional, it was so impactful. But it was so enlightening, and I felt so privileged that she trusted me enough to share that with me. She trusted me with her innermost thoughts. She was a mother who was broken. We never tried to understand her, because in the rush to complete our assessments, in the rush to make recommendations, we judged, we labeled, we stigmatized. and we didn't make time to understand. I'm not blaming anybody for that because of the volume of work and the timescales that social workers are bound by. But somehow we have to make time to engage parents, to truly understand parents. Miss, I wear the robe of shame. Imagine a parent having to carry that for all these years and nobody understanding it. It was just dreadful, absolutely dreadful. A black mother was trying to do everything for her kids, and all she knows is she wears a robe of shame.